Shalom and welcome to the channel. This is your brother Isaac Leonard with the Word of God. I want to begin with a special word for you. The word of the day today is pogrom. It comes from Russian pogrom, and it is a violent and murderous and coordinated attack against Jewish minorities in the Russian Empire, which appeared in the 19th century and reached the beginnings of the 20th century in Russia until the Bolsheviks outlawed these practices, but not anti-Semitism itself. The pogroms didn't take place in Russia alone. From 1933 to 35 in Nazi Germany, there were several pogroms against Jews in their businesses and homes, including individual violence. The situation came to its most notorious climax with the state-orchestrated Kristallnacht, the Night of Broken Glass, in November 9 to 10, 1938. This last one caused the death of almost 100 Jews and thousands arrested and sent to concentration camps. Their shops were looted, their homes vandalized, and their synagogues burned. These horrible practices took place also in the Muslim world. Up to 600 Jews were murdered in Iraq in June 1 and 2, 1941, with businesses and homes looted, women raped, and children mutilated. In Aden, Yemen, another horrible pogrom caused the death of more than 80 Jews and the destruction of the Jewish quarter. And in Aleppo, Syria, another one in December 1947 caused the desecration of the great synagogue of Aleppo, several Jews murdered, and attacks of Jewish homes, shops, and other synagogues. The Holy Land itself saw the rising of pogroms at the time, since the return of Jews to the Holy Land, encouraged by the Zionist movement and the Balfour Declaration, two kinds of Arabs began to migrate to the British Mandate of Palestine. The first ones were attracted by the economical possibilities that the Jews were creating in a land neglected for centuries. The second ones were savagely opposed to the return of the Jews and even the possibility that they could establish their own state. They conducted several pogroms, among them in Jerusalem, 1920, the Navi Musa riots caused 5 murdered and 200 injured Jews. In Jaffa, 1921, 47 murdered and thousands injured. In Hebron, in 1929, the Hebron massacre, 67 Jews murdered, many homes looted. In Safed, 1929, 18 murdered, dozens wounded. Several pogroms took place also throughout the land between 1936 and 1939, known as the Arab Revolt. The most infamous pogrom imaginable in any country or year was conducted by Hamas in October 7, with more than 1,200 deaths, women raped, babies burned and decapitated, and other atrocities, ending in the taking of more than 200 hostages. It prompted the Gaza war, which is still ongoing, and the loss of moral compass we see in our streets, with people chanting "Free Palestine" and globalize the Intifada. If you know some of the deranged souls demonstrating for Hamas, please tell them the history of pogroms and why is Israel fighting Hamas. The Arabic translation of pogrom for the Palestinian Arabs is intifada. It is totally inhuman to support a terrorist organization that conducts itself like that. There's even a longer and most important history to follow, and it is in the Word of God, the history of the people that came from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, were captive in Egypt for 400 years and taken from there to the Holy Land by Moses around 1400 BC. This story not only gives us the right perspective and context of the existence of Israel in the Holy Land, our own salvation is anchored in it. And it all starts with God's promise to Abraham more than 4,000 years ago. In Genesis 12, verses 1 to 3, we read, "Now the Lord said to Abraham, Go forth from your country, and from your relatives, and from your father's house, to the land which I will show you, and I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you, and make your name great, and so you shall be a blessing. And I will bless those who bless you, and the one who curses you I will curse, and in you all the families of the earth will be blessed." These families of the earth come from Hebrew called Mispachot Ha'adamah, where Mispachot, being the plural of Mispacha, is the word for family in Hebrew, but it means often also clan or tribe or even nation. Especially in Genesis 12 and 3, God is talking about the blessing that would come to every nation in Abraham. In this map, you can see the nations of the earth in the times of Moses. Let us start with Israel in Egypt. In the southwest, in dark green, we can see the land of Egypt. This distribution is from around 14,000 BC, and Israel was a people without the land, living in Egypt as Pharaoh's slaves. This captivity was prophesied to Abraham in Genesis 15:13, and the liberation of his people in Genesis 15:14. It was Moses, the one God called to do this task. In Exodus 1, verses 1 to 4, verse 23, we read about Israel's slavery, Moses' birth, and early life, how he had to flee from Egypt, and how God called him to go back to Egypt to set Israel free. And in Exodus 3, verses 19 and 20, where God tells Moses what he would do, as he had told Abraham 500 years before. Then from Exodus 7 to 12, we read about the fulfillment of those prophecies to both Abraham and Moses. It is in Exodus 12 when Pharaoh surrendered to God's will and let Israel go. During 40 years, the people wandered in the desert with Moses in their way to the promised land, Canaan, in dark gray at the northeast of Egypt. That had been prophesied to Abraham in Genesis 15, verses 18 to 21. This history begins in Exodus 12 and 33 and takes all the rest of the book of Exodus and the whole books of Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Now there were another territories around Israel, especially other empires, at the time when the Hittites, in purple, at the north occupying Asia Minor and part of Canaan, Assyria, in black at the northeast corner, and Babylonian, in pink, south of Assyria. Assyria and Babylonia were far from being the powerful empires they would become centuries later. Bordering the land of Canaan were 6 distinctive territories populated by ancient peoples, most of them now disappeared and having very different names that they have now. Aram in orange, west of Babylonia, was populated by Amorites at the time. The name Aram means Syria in the Old Testament. Phoenicia, in white, between Canaan and the Hittite Empire, was the country that is known now as Lebanon. Wherever the name Lebanon appears in the Old Testament, it means the woods of cedar trees in the mountains of Lebanon. Philistia, in black, between Egypt and Canaan, was the land of the Philistines, the only ones in the whole region that were not Semites but Europeans. Nowadays it is Gaza. At that time was a little bit larger. The Philistines were the people of Goliath, the gigantic warrior that David defeated. The country we know now as Jordan didn't exist, but in its place were these 3 kingdoms, which were very much related to Israel, mostly as enemies. Ammon, in light gray, east of the Sea of Galilee in Israel, was the land of the Ammonites, descendants of Lot, Abraham's nephew. Moab, in brown, south of Ammon, was the land of the Moabites, as Ruth, the protagonist of the book of her name, who were also descendants of Lot. Edom, in red, south of Moab, was the land of the Edomites, descendants of Esau, Jacob's brother. Their land is also called Seir in the Old Testament. Last but not least, we have Arabia, light green in the southeast part, which was pretty much the Arabian Peninsula and the only place where Arabs lived and Arabic was spoken. There was no Islam at the time. All the people who named it were not Arabs and spoke their own language, not Arabic. There is a name missing at this time, Palestine, and the reason is that it didn't exist. We shall see later, much later, the birth of Palestine and what it was. As you can see now, the color of Canaan has changed into golden yellow. It happened around 1400 BC when Israel came to Canaan and occupied the land, as God had promised Abraham and Moses. The book of Joshua depicts this conquest and also certain parts which were not conquered, as Phoenicia and Philistia. From this time, Israel had no king, but it was a theocracy for around 400 years. This period is the theme of the book of Judges in the Bible, depicting how their enemies attacked them and even oppressed them, and then God raised a deliverer to set Israel free again. Well-known examples are Deborah and Barak, Gideon and Samson. Around 1200 BC, the Amorites lost Syria to the Arameans. That's why it would be called Aram for centuries. Arameans spoke Aramaic, a Semitic language that would prevail in both the Assyrian and Babylonian empires. The Hebrews adopted the Aramaic alphabet, and some portions of the Bible are written in Aramaic. The Phoenicians that we have seen before in nowadays Lebanon spoke Phoenician, and they were seafarers and merchants that colonized many territories in the Mediterranean Sea, in North Africa, in Spain, and some islands, as Sicily and Sardinia. They were also a Semitic people with their own Phoenician language that was spread on the Mediterranean in the west, as Greek was in the east. The Bible showed the Philistines originally coming from Caphtor, Hebrew for Crete, in Greece. Genesis 10:14 shows us that they are descendants of Mizraim, Egyptians, which matches the Minoan civilization, a very ancient one that used hieroglyphs as the Egyptians did, but other kind of hieroglyphs. Genesis 20 and 21 shows some interaction between Abraham and the Philistines. And in Genesis 26, between Isaac and them also. But those Philistines are not the ones that Saul and David fought. In Amos chapter 9 and verse 7, we read that the Caphtorites, Cretans, conquered Philistia. This event is dated in secular history around 1175 BC. At that time, Crete had been almost 3 centuries united to mainland Greece, and the Minoan civilization was gone, being Crete Greek territory now. This means that the Philistines Amos prophesied about were Greeks. This is Amos 9, verse 7, the second half. God speaking. Have I not brought up Israel from the land of Egypt, and the Philistines from Caphtor, and the Arameans from Kir? Israel came from Egypt around 1400 BC. The Arameans conquered Syria around 1200 BC, and the Cretans, Philistines, conquered Philistia around 1175 BC. Why could be it important to know? Philistines were descendants of Mizraim in Egypt, the older ones, or Caphtor, Crete, conquered by the Greeks 300 years before. But they were anything but Semites. A myth that has been introduced is that the Palestinian Arabs are descendants of the ancient Canaanites and that they were Philistines from Philistia, Palestine. But the Palestinian Arabs are Arabs with Arab DNA, speaking Arabic, similar to Egyptians, Lebanese, Jordanian, or Syrian Arabs. Many of them do come from those countries, as a matter of fact. Before World War I, when those lands had been under Ottoman control for centuries, there were only Arabs mixed with the native populations. There were no Syrians or Jordanians or Lebanese, let alone Palestinians, because those countries didn't exist since the times of Rome. Jordan didn't exist ever. It was a new created country. Syria took the borders of ancient Aram and Lebanon of ancient Phoenicia. Genesis 19, verse 37 to 39 show the origins of the Ammonites and Moabites. They were descendants of Lot, Abraham's nephew, and as such, Semitic peoples with their own Semitic languages. The Edomites lived east of the Negev, and they were another Semitic people with their own Semitic language. They descended, according to Genesis 36, from Esau, brother of Israel and son of Isaac, the son of Abraham. And their land is known as Edom or Seir in Genesis 32 and verse 3. The Arabs lived only in the Arabian Peninsula at the time. They also descend from Abraham via Ishmael. In the Bible, Ishmael was sent away with his mother Hagar and lived in Paran, which is located in the Sinai Peninsula, where he took an Egyptian wife. His descendants lived in Arabia, according to Genesis 25 and 18, and the Bible calls them Ishmaelites. They also are a Semitic people, and Arabic a Semitic language. Around 1050 BC, Israel became a kingdom. The last judge, that was Samuel, anointed the two first kings of the unified kingdom, Saul and David. Then it came Solomon, the last king, who ruled the whole kingdom, and he died around 1930 BC. Under King David, Jerusalem became Israel's capital. You can read about it in 2 Samuel chapter 5 verses 6 to 10. And under Solomon, the territory was extended in Aram. You can read about it in 1 Kings chapter 4 and 21. Israel's history at that time can be found in the books of 1 and 2 Samuel in the Bible about Saul and David, and in 1 Kings chapters 1 to 11 about Solomon. It was King Solomon who built the first temple in Jerusalem around 1968 BC. It is in 1 Kings in the chapters 6 to 8. Some changes took place in the region. The Hittite Empire collapsed and was replaced by some new Hittite states that were not really Hittite. Phrygia occupied most of the territory of the Hittites and lost, and would be later replaced by Lydia as the greater kingdom in Asia Minor. Assyria was growing as a great power, and the Arameans had defeated the Amorites and had their own kingdom, with Damascus as their capital. Ammon, Moab, Edom, and Philistia were roughly the same. They waged war against Saul in 1 Samuel 14:47, and against David also in 2 Samuel chapters 5, 8, and also chapters 10 to 12. But Israel emerged victorious all the time. Aram fought Israel as well, but to no avail. It is in 2 Samuel chapters 8 and chapter 10. Note that the Arabs are nowhere to be found in Israel at the time. They were not organized as a caliphate yet, for Islam didn't exist, and all of the wars of the period were between Israel and its neighbors. Certainly no Palestine existed at that time. Neither the great empires had emerged yet, Assyria, Babylonia, or Persia. The Bible shows some skirmishes with Ishmaelites in 2 Chronicles 21:16, 26:7, but not any wars, because the Arabs had no caliphates at the time, which mean no armies. Sometimes they supported some of Israel's enemies, but their relations with Israel and all other countries were rather commercial. Around 930 BC, King Solomon died. His son Rehoboam succeeded him, but 10 tribes in the north rejected him and succeeded for the kingdom. Israel became two separated kingdoms, Judah in the south and Israel in the north, often prophetically in the Bible called Ephraim. This is the history of Israel we find from 1 Kings 12 to the end of 2 Kings, when both kingdoms fell to Assyria and Babylonia. Egypt attacked Judah at the time in 1 Kings 14:25, and Aram attacked Israel in 1 Kings 20 and 2 Kings chapters 6 and 7. There were wars between Israel and Moab in 2 Kings 3, Judah and Edom, 2 Kings 8 from verse 20 to 24, Israel and Aram, 2 Kings 13, 24 to 25. Besides, the relationship between the two kingdoms, Judah and Israel, was anything but friendly. Sometimes they were at war, and sometimes they united forces against other kingdoms. Note that the Arabs are still missing in the Holy Land, meaning no Arabs in Israel and no Jewish Arab wars, certainly no Palestine. In the next video, we shall explore the existence of Israel under the empires prophesied by Daniel in chapter 7 and interpreted by him from King Nebuchadnezzar's dream in Daniel chapter 2. Remember to subscribe to the channel. Shalom Ulehitraot.